Sensei Grizzly, here to do a interview that was sent in to me by DD214BJJ and Where Veterans Train. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to do this interview to raise awareness for what it is that DD214BJJ does through my social networking, because I do believe it's a worthy cause. For those of you that have not heard of this organization, DD214BJJ does different fight apparel, uniforms, patches, these kind of things. And what they're trying to do is to raise money and awareness for veterans dealing with PTSD, survival guilt, because it was founded by two Marines that they believe that jiu-jitsu and combat sports is a positive outlet for stress, it's a way of healing for combat vets dealing with issues now that they're back home. And that's an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. So we're doing this interview to help raise awareness, and here we go. I started my military career in 2001. I enlisted in the North Carolina Army National Guard on March 22nd, prior to the 9/11 events. While in the Army National Guard, I spent several years on an active status between Operation Noble Eagle, recruiting and retention with Area 5 Recruiting Command. I was on a rear detachment task force supporting units that were already in Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course I was on Operation Iraqi Freedom for years 2005 and 6. I have served as a licensed security guard in the state of North Carolina. I'm currently serving as a physical therapist assistant, and I'm currently serving in the reserves. Just finished a long tenure as a drill sergeant with a mobilization on Task Force Marshall, and currently serving with Cadet Command at A&T University. So I have a long, extensive history with the military, serving in the healthcare environment now. I actually got involved in combat sports when I was 7 years old through boxing. Eventually got into striking arts. Did Silam Kung Fu for some years, which is a hard style of Kung Fu, and they were training it in a hybridized version of that with Arnis at the school that I was studying at, and then did Kempo Karate for some time. I was initially exposed to jiu-jitsu through the Modern Army Combatives program when I was in basic training, and just kind of fell in love with it. I really found myself in the grappling arts, and as a result, never looked back. So currently I've been involved with American Combat Jiu-Jitsu, which is a hard style that has a lot of similarities to Combat Sambo. Eventually got involved in Judo and Sambo. Currently, I hold a 4th degree black belt in American Combat Jiu-Jitsu, a 2nd degree black belt in Judo. I am a black belt instructor for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Joe Moreira International, and I have gotten gold, silver, and bronze medals at the U.S. Sambo National Championships for the last 3 years running. So I am still pursuing Judo and Sambo competition, and am still pursuing my professorship for both American Combat Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Sport tape, and lots of it. There is nothing that drives me crazier than when like a blue belt who's been doing this for a couple of years and should know better comes up and says, "Sensei, can I borrow some tape?" But Sport tape is what holds the grappling, wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo world together quite literally, whether it's jammed toes or sprained fingers or sprained wrists, using it in lieu of kinesio tape, using it in lieu of a tennis elbow band. Sport tape, lots of it. Can't get enough, need stock in sports tape. If anybody wants to know what to get me for birthday, Father's Day, Christmas, it would be wholesale packs of sport tape. So when I first attempted to cross over into judo, obviously my mat work was advanced because of my years of training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I had an understanding, a foundational understanding of throwing techniques, because throwing techniques are a big chunk of American combat Jiu-Jitsu. But when I first approached judo, looking back on it, I was definitely force-fitting the square peg of jiu-jitsu into the round hole of judo, and it was causing me to lose a lot. And it wasn't until I was willing to sacrifice my ego and just go for throws and just play the judo game the way that it's meant to be played that I started to see real success. And that initial failure to adapt is I have tried to pass that knowledge and wisdom on to people that are crossing over to judo for the first time from other grappling backgrounds. And now 4 state championships later, multiple city regional championships, and a second degree black belt. Learning that lesson to empty my cup, so to speak, was very powerful. And it was something that I also had to later do when I was crossing over into the sambo competition, which is, yes, there are a lot of similarities between judo and sambo, but sambo is still kind of its own animal, and you have to kind of learn to adapt to that environment. Otherwise, you're kind of going in only 75% ready. So empty your cup, learn to adapt, and don't try to force fit the square peg of whatever your background is through the round hole of whatever it is that you're trying to expand or integrate. So probably the most worthwhile investment that I've made in my life, I think, has been my 19 plus years of combined military service. So much of why I've been able to be successful in the civilian world, in my civilian job, as a martial artist, as a fighter, I think is because of the discipline and the structure that the military gave me very early on. I owe my education to the military. I owe my home to the military. A lot of credentials that you can only really acquire through your service in the Army have gotten me a lot of places civilian side. The fact that I got into jiu-jitsu and grappling arts in the first place was because of my exposure through the Modern Army Combatives program, going through the Master Trainer process with the Army Combatives program has heavily influenced the way that I teach my students, and I think that it can be given credit for a lot of my students' success. Why within the communities that I'm a part of, my training methods are considered to be good and successful. I owe I owe so much of my life, really my whole life, to the time investment and the lessons learned from the Army. I think the first thing that comes to mind with that question is actually, it kind of makes me think of my judo coach, Sensei Graham Hockley, who retired from the British Army, and he's former British Army judo team, former British national judo team. And Sensei Hockley hates the use of mouthpieces in judo, hates it. And so he'd always tease me whenever I'd put my mouthpiece in to get ready to spar or compete. And I'd say, well, I'm protecting my teeth. I like my teeth. I want to keep them. I said, what do you do to protect your teeth? And his response to that was to take his partial out of his mouth and set it on top of the ring post, and put his hands up and commence to spar with some of the students. So rather than putting a mouthpiece in, Sensei Hockley takes his teeth out so that they don't get damaged. He's one of the toughest, most dedicated judoka I've ever had the pleasure of personally knowing, and I just don't intend to follow in his footsteps in terms of protecting my teeth. Sensei, I'm going to use a mouthpiece till the day I die. So, love you, but I don't want to have teeth like yours. One habit that I developed that I have found to be very helpful and useful is a couple times a week I do the prep drill, the hip stability drill, and the Rockford 5 exercise program to protect my hips, my low back, and my shoulders respectively. So as I turned that corner from men's divisions into masters divisions, and I started noticing that aches and pains and like nagging chronic injuries were starting to stack up, I feel better and am more stable and am less prone to injury as long as I'm doing those as a part of my warm-ups 2 to 3 times a week. So that's prep drill, hip stability drill from the Army Physical Readiness Training Program, and the Rockford 5, which is a rehabilitative program that we do with people who have had rotator cuff injuries and repairs. My advice to a new student that really wants to pursue jiu-jitsu or any grappling art is to really work on bedrock fundamentals. Get your north, south, east, west with your mat work basics. Remember that all of these fancy upgrades don't work properly if you don't have the original operating software. Touch on those things that you don't like to do. Pay special attention to the things that you're bad at and get better at them to plug the holes in your game, and just continuously work the fundamentals. Have a comprehensive game, okay? Even if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is your focus, you need to make sure that you've got some basic wrestling and some basic judo so that you have takedowns and can defend yourself standing up. If you're a judoka, you need to make sure that you get good fundamental mat work and that you have a guard game with which to defend yourself, even though that's not your primary offense. What I would tell students to avoid is to get so specialized that if someone defeats your specialty, you have no other tools in your toolbox to defend yourself with. All too often I see these high-level guard players that they've really developed things like worm guard, lapel guard, lasso guard, De La Hiva, whatever it is. But if you pass their guard, you pin them in a side control position, their spirit just breaks because they were really never taught how to defend themselves against a person holding them, just your basic yokoshi hokatami. So avoid being highly specialized like that. Stay away from the thinking trap that the answer to hiding your weaknesses is to work on your strengths rather than improving what you're weak on. So be well-rounded, have watertight fundamentals, and work on whatever it is you're weak on, and you'll be good to go. I myself and people that I work with occasionally get to training plateaus where they stop seeing a lot of forward progress with the practical application of the moves that they're working on. And they get frustrated. Sometimes you'll hear this called the blue belt blues, and that's when people will disappear for periods of time or disappear completely from training and never to be seen or heard from again. And my advice to them, and something that has worked for me, is that if your practical application is stymied and at a standstill, continue to go to class, continue to drill, continue to grind your fundamentals, continue to work on your randori and just staying sharp with your sparring. But in the background, that is probably a good time to start working on the mental preparation and the philosophical component of jiu-jitsu. I would take that time to maybe read things like Mind Over Muscle by Jigoro Kano, Judo's founder. Take that time to read the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Take that time to read the Demon Sermon on Martial Arts. And a lot of the philosophical questions that, life questions that we face as people that are on this martial path, this gives you a lot to think about, a lot to kind of ponder within yourself. And what I have found is that a lot of times when you've kind of gotten as full of new content as you're going to get, and you need time to digest that, the philosophical side of it, you will start to see breakthroughs in your practical application again. And that door kind of continues to swing both ways, practical application, philosophical side, throughout your career. I've been doing this at this point for, almost 30 years, between striking arts and grappling arts combined, with almost no time off other than like for college. And once I kind of figured that out right around age 25, 26, I started to see gigantic acceleration in my deeper understanding of what this is and what it's for, and as well as my practical application. I just wish that someone had told me that, or I'd figured that out when I was 16, 17, 18, and Lord only knows how far I could have gotten. But hindsight's 20/20. So if there's anything that I would pass on to the next generation, it's to have that wisdom to know when is it time to focus on the philosophical side while grinding through your fundamentals, and when is it time to work on progressing your practical application while you digest all of the theory and philosophy that you've taken in. So just one more time, look up DD214BJJ. It is a great way to support surviving veterans that are reintegrating to the community through martial arts. And if you're a veteran out there, look up the Where Veterans Train group on Facebook. I'm Sensei Grizzly. this has been my talk-through interview for DD214BJJ.